Greetings. My name is Greg Tanner. I'm the State Director for AARP Georgia. Welcome to our discussion today on age discrimination in the workplace in Georgia. This is a growing concern impacting many older Georgians throughout the state. Despite a lifetime of hard work and excellent reviews, older workers will sometimes find themselves out of a job or in a reduced position. AARP Protecting Older Workers Against Discrimination survey found that nearly 2 in 3 workers, ages 45 to 74, said that they have seen or experienced discrimination in the workplace. Nearly 20% said they believe that they were not hired for a job because of their age. Compounding the age discrimination issue is a 2009 U.S. Supreme Court ruling that determines that older workers met a higher burden of proof in age discrimination cases that is required to prove race, religious, or gender discrimination. AARP continues extensive efforts to change this inequitable ruling and encourage our members to join the fight. We're joined today by volunteers, members, staff, community members, and local experts to discuss the landscape of workplace age discrimination in Georgia, the challenge of older workers, and the strategies to empower Georgians to become more marketable. We appreciate everyone being here with us today to begin these important discussions to help each individual discover their real possibilities. Now, I would like to welcome our moderator for our broadcast. Bobby Batista is an award-winning, internationally known broadcast journalist known for hosting GPB's nightly news program On the Story. Bobby is known for her work on CNN, HLN, and CNN International. Let's welcome Bobby.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it very much. And thanks to you, our viewing audience, for joining us today. Here are some startling statistics. Did you know that about 1 in 3 older Georgia voters report that they or someone they know has recently experienced age discrimination in the workplace? And 4 in 5 Georgians are concerned that age could be an obstacle to finding work. Additionally, most Georgians feel this issue crosses party lines, and the majority would like Congress to do something about it. So today, we've assembled a panel of national and local experts to address workplace discrimination and provide you with employer marketability strategies. Joining us today, Cheryl Matheis, Senior Principal and Counsel for AARP. Cheryl has more than 25 years of experience achieving social change policies that benefit people 50 plus and their families. Cheryl often represents AARP before external audiences, including legislative and regulatory bodies and national public affairs and news broadcasts like today. Steven Wagner is a trial attorney at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. His practice involves representing the EEOC in handling claims related to Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, and the Equal Pay Act. Rita Izaquirre is the Human Resources Director for Jackson Spalding. Rita is in charge of talent acquisition, development, and retention for 3 offices. In her former role, she served 3 years as Senior Vice President for Talent Acquisition, Diversity, and HR Compliance at SunTrust Banks. And finally, Dr. Jennifer Kraft Morgan of the Gerontology Institute at Georgia State University. Dr. Morgan's research focuses on jobs and careers to understand how policy, population, workplace, and individual level factors shape how work is experienced and how it's organized. Dr. Morgan is currently the principal investigator of 2 studies in workplace aging. So welcome to all of you. Appreciate it. Cheryl, let me start with you. It seems to me that most people who are nearing retirement today are not able to retire. The majority of them aren't. And some people are trying to go back into the workforce. Like 50 is the new 65, though, because if you're over the age of 50, you seem to be a target for age discrimination. And I think what's confusing to people is that there is a law in effect that was enacted in 1967 against age discrimination. So what is that law, and why does it not appear to be working?
Sure. Thanks, Bobby. Well, the fact is that there is a 1967 law called the Age Discrimination in Employment Act. It's just like the laws against other kinds of discrimination, I think it was mentioned earlier, against discrimination on the basis of sex, race, national origin. And for years, it was interpreted the same way. If you thought you were discriminated against, you could bring a complaint. You had to prove it. You had to prove some evidence. And if that was the case, then you got a remedy. So what happened recently, in about 2003, a man named Jack Gross, very nice man because I met him, I've talked to him. He had great performance reviews, and he was suddenly demoted from his job. He was 54 years old. And what happened is the person who was much younger than him, who he had supervised, suddenly became his supervisor. Now, he didn't understand why this happened, and so he brought a complaint. He said, I think this is age discrimination. And he ended up bringing a suit in federal district court under the Age Discrimination and Employment Act. He provided evidence that he had been discriminated against, and the court ruled in his favor. But his employer appealed, and the Court of Appeals ruled against him. It went to the Supreme Court, and in 2009, the Supreme Court issued a decision which essentially said, if it's an age discrimination case, there's a different standard of proof. It's a higher standard. It's not enough just to prove that you were discriminated against in any way, but you had to prove that that was the major reason, that was the reason. Now, when you're not a lawyer, you sort of say, okay, proof, what is it? If he proved it, how much more does he have to prove? But it made a big difference. His case went back to the district court, and he couldn't meet that higher standard because it's hard to prove that something is the only reason, the real reason that somebody did something. So in this situation now, we have a situation where age discrimination is almost impossible to prove in the workplace. But there is a proposal.
I was going to say, there is a proposal.
I was going to say, the good news is that there is a bipartisan proposal. Mr. Gross was from Iowa. His two senators, Chuck Grassley, a Republican, and Tom Harkin, a Democrat, introduced a proposal in the Congress for the Protecting of Older Workers Against Discrimination Act. That's POWADA, POWADA. And that proposal is pending now. And what we are doing at AARP is we are encouraging members of Congress, particularly senators, to get behind that proposal and get it enacted.
Are you anticipating passage?
Well, it's been tough. I mean, I think that the way I would say it is if we don't get passage this year, we're going to bring it up again next year because it's an untenable situation. And as more and more people are actually seeing the impact of this, we think that Congress will eventually figure out that this is not a good idea.
Yeah, good luck with this year, since we know there's not a whole lot going on in Congress. But Steve, if you could break the law down a little bit for us, who does this law protect?
Well, the ADEA protects anyone 40 and over. So AARP, I think membership is 50 and over, but ADEA protects people 40 and over. And it protects people from discrimination based on really anything that happens within your workplace. It could be hiring and firing are the obvious ones, but also promotions, benefits, raises, assignments. If you get assigned to a worse location because of your age, that can be actionable. But it also protects you from harassment, which we don't see a lot of age harassment cases because I think people are too smart to do it. But some types of age harassment would be, calling you an old man, saying, do you need a wheelchair, that kind of stuff. Those are even tougher cases to prove because it has to be severe or pervasive. So the law lets them do some of it, but if it gets too bad, really severe, or if it's everyday, constant, it could be harassment based on age. It also protects you from retaliation. If you complain about age discrimination and then you get fired or harassed or demoted, then it protects you from retaliation as well.
And we should remind people it does not work in reverse. You
Correct.
cannot claim that you're too young. Right?
You can't claim you're too young, but like I said, if you're 40 years old, you're protected. And employers can also protect older workers and discriminate in their favor. So they can give benefits to someone who's 60 or 65. They don't have to give to someone who's 55 or 50. And another key component to remember is just because the person who is being promoted over you is also protected doesn't mean it's not age discrimination. They just have to be substantially younger than you are, which could be you're 65, they're 62. And I think the older you get, the shorter the gap can be between your ages.
Is the EEOC seeing an increase in filings? I'm curious.
We really have, especially with the economy tanking in 2008, 2009. There were a lot of layoffs. And layoffs really generate a lot of age discrimination claims because they're looking at their workforce. We have 50 people. 10 of people are old, close to 65. It won't hurt them as much to be laid off, so we'll lay those people off. And so with those layoffs came a lot of age discrimination claims. In Georgia, the EEOC, I think, saw almost 1,000 claims last year based on age, which is about 18% of our charges that we receive.
Rita, it's not only hard to prove, sometimes it's hard to recognize in the workplace. So you're a human resources director. What are the signs of age discrimination in the workplace?
Well, typically it's what we call the good stereotypes. So explaining that someone who's more mature would do a different job than someone who's younger. Using what we call code language in some ways about energy and ability to change, adapt, be flexible. So those are the things that you need to be watching out for. And I think HR plays a tremendous role in educating managers who are in a position to either hire or promote workers, to recognize that those are the things that could cloud their ability to be in an advancement mode when they still have the wrong way in order to contribute to the organization.
Here's something I didn't know. An employer can ask you your age in an interview. That's legal, correct?
Yes.
Steve?
It's legal, but it's dicey. Whenever you start asking age, you're going to set yourself up for more scrutiny. Why are they asking age? What are you doing with that age? It's perfectly legal to ask. It's what they do with it that could be a problem.
I hear rumblings from the audience on that one because I think we've probably all sort of been there. Jennifer, part of what underlies this sort of insidious prejudice in the workplace are misconceptions about older workers. So what are some of those myths and how do we dispel them?
Well, people tend to use stereotypes to organize information on groups of people. So older workers as a group of people. And these stereotypes can be dangerous, right? If we have dangerous categories like older workers are unwilling to learn, as Rita mentioned, or have one foot out the door, or are less productive than younger workers. And those myths are what we use to make decisions about workers instead of processing the information that's out there that really doesn't substantiate that. Research shows that workers, older learners, are able to retain and process information just like younger workers. They're willing and able to learn. The only research that's not in the favor of older workers is a marginal difference in the rate on which they learn. Older workers take a little bit longer, but generally they can retain that information. And they have other things that help them cope with that marginal difference, right? They have experience. They understand the inner workings of the organization. They have tacit knowledge related to organizations and organizational history. They have experience, and experience matters often in organizations.
Cheryl, I think you said AARP has some statistics on the productivity level of older workers in the workplace.
It's actually interesting. We've done several studies on the business case for older workers because we realize that, in some ways you can't just rely on people suing every time they feel they've been discriminated against. The better way to do it is to get the employers to understand the value and to keep older workers. So one study that just came out, and it's called the longevity economy, and it's basically a study on the value of people over 50 to the economy of the jurisdiction. And I've got a few numbers here about Georgia. This is Georgia specific. People over 50 make up 31% of the population in Georgia, but they are worth every year $203 billion to Georgia's economy. Billion dollars. They pay 49% of the taxes.
They have all the money.
Well, it is, if you don't keep people in the workplace, they're not going to be able to do that.
That's exactly right.
And that's the point. And I think there are a number of other studies that have been done by other groups that really show that, you know, there is a value to keeping an older worker. And one of the problems that employers are going to face soon, and maybe my colleagues over here can address it, is, you know, the baby boomer generation is referred to as the pig in a python, you know, and the people coming after them are much fewer. Well, the problem is going to be there's not going to be workers in the succeeding generations to fill all the jobs. So even if employers aren't seeing it right now, pretty soon they're going to see that they don't have enough workers if they don't keep their older workforce.
Or even hire that older workforce, because that's the fallacy, is that we will have enough replacements. It is not just keeping who you have, but bringing in that experience, bringing in that opportunity for people to generate better workings amongst generations too. I believe that there's a huge value for an organization in their mentoring programs, for instance, create a dual mentoring situation, older worker to younger worker, and making sure that they both learn from each other. So I think that that's very true in terms of contribution. Going back just a second though about the age question, which Steve rightfully said is dicey. You can ask anything. The worker does not have to respond to that question necessarily, and I would submit that you shouldn't. So,
Yeah.
just something additional to think about
Better to
out
plead
there.
the fifth.
Yes.
Right. This is an emotional issue, and so I want to get the audience involved, and I think we have questions coming up already. Am I going over here? Yeah, go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Madeline. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very excited to be here. The question on age is, not only, I have not experienced an interviewer asking me my age, but on applications online and in person, they ask your date of birth, and that automatically tells what your age is. So I don't know whether that's something that could be corrected, but a person can find out your age regardless whether you put on an application or not. Social media is there, and they could look you up all kind of ways. So we've experienced that also. So how do we handle that?
Yes, Steve, is that, it sort of defeats the law a little bit, you know what I mean? Is there not a way around that?
I mean, asking your age on an application, like I said, there's nothing wrong with it, but it does set them up for scrutiny. But if they really want to find out your age, there's other ways to do it. A lot of times they'll ask you, you know, when did you graduate from high school?
Yeah.
They can just do the math. So it's not so complicated to figure out your age.
Yeah. Zing.
I actually would rather have them answer it so that if you do have a discrimination claim later on, you show that they had knowledge of your age.
I actually read something the other day that was shocking to me, that there are even more insidious ways that they're trying to figure out how old you are. And if you have a Hotmail or an AOL.
I saw that article.
Yes. Did you see that? Yeah, a Hotmail or an AOL private email, get rid of it, because they know you're over 40 if you have that. Here's the one that really got me. Double spacing after a period at the end of a sentence, because we all learned how to type on a typewriter, and it was double space, right? Well, younger people don't do that. They didn't learn on a typewriter. So they don't double space. In fact, they sometimes don't even use capital letters. So, you know, get rid of the double space after your periods. The little things like that are ways that their companies are, I mean, do human resources director look for ways, Rita, to ferret out people's ages?
I have not experienced that openly. To be honest with you, partially the reason for asking the questions about your age in the application and all that is that eventually you're still going to have to put it in for benefits, because we cannot provide benefits unless we know where you fall actuarially, and that's just a requirement. I think that, again, the intent to discriminate is not necessarily there, but looking for how to maximize profitability and productivity for the organization is. And so depending on how well the policies and practices are aligned in an organization, you may find that there is a bias, because what are the stereotypes? The stereotypes are the lack of energy, not productive, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to make sure you walk the talk.
Well, that's an important point for education, right? Because the truth is there's no conclusive evidence that there's a relationship, a negative relationship between increasing age and productivity. Right. There's no conclusive evidence that that's the case.
Very true.
And get rid of the landline.
Okay, well, that was the other one.
That's another one. Yeah.
And don't put your home address on
and don't put your home address.
resume.
Right. Another question from the audience.
Yes, speaking about PARADA, which you had mentioned, the Protection Against Older Workers Against Discrimination Act. Now you said the Supreme Court has ruled or watered down that protection, and I know that AARP is addressing it, but I wanted to know from the panel, what else can be done to circumvent that or overturn that decision?
Well, if you want to overturn a Supreme Court decision, you have to pass a law in Congress, basically.
Yes.
I mean, that is, so that, I mean, I don't mean to be flip. That is really the objective. But I think that what my co-panelists are saying is that in order to really address age discrimination, it's an education effort. You really have to persuade employers with hard evidence that older workers are going to be good for them. Partly because they're going to need more workers because they won't have them if they don't try keeping them. You know, partly because the older workers are actually doing a good job. Bobby, earlier you said they have all the money, and I really want to address that because our study showed that these older workers who are contributing that $203 billion, sorry, I reversed it, to the economy. They're spending an average of $28,000 a year. These are not rich people.
Right.
These are people, it is just, this is a population that is really important to the economy and to businesses. And even though we want legal protection as the backstop and also as sort of a sentinel effect, like if the employer knows they're going to get sued if they do this, maybe they won't do it. Mm-hmm. But we really have to educate.
Yeah, even if you change the law, which I think it will be changed, because it has to, it's not the same as the rest of discrimination laws, you're still going to have age discrimination. It's going to be easier to prove, but you'll still have it. So education is the biggest thing. And there's still a lot of people who don't think age discrimination is real discrimination. I think people get it that you can't do something on race or disability or gender, but age, I think people still think, well, it's age, you know, it's not a big deal. But we are all going to be 40 and above. God willing. So we're all protected. So you know, people need to be educated that this is real.
Another question from the audience over here.
Good morning. Thank you to AARP for being here this morning. My question mostly maybe for Steve or for everybody. What kind of policy are in place legally, you know, to kind of persuasively help the insurance agency? Because I heard people say, well, we don't hire older workers because they got too many medical problems. But we don't take out to go have babies. We don't go run to daycare. I mean, I'm not against the stuff, okay? But there's a balance here. So what kind of policies are in play or being put in place? We're paying all of the taxes and things. They need to do something. So insurance companies too can be kind of nudged into working with benefits. She brought up benefit, and that was the reason for my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, older workers, the benefit issue is part of the discrimination. If you're not hiring you because it costs more to employ you, because your benefits are you know, cost more because of your health issues or whatever that might be, I mean, that could be an age claim, it could be a disability claim too. The way to change it, like I said, is education and enforcement. You know, AARP educates and the EEOC enforces.
Can I be turned down for a job because I'm overqualified? That's another issue that comes up, right? It's that's sort of a way of saying you're too old. You know, I mean, is that a legitimate claim?
I think it could be. I mean, it depends. Like a lot of legal questions, it depends. Is overqualified code word for age, or is it just, you know, look, we have an entry-level person. You know, we have concerns that you're not going to want to be an employee. You want to be the boss. But I think you run into real issues when you start saying you're overqualified. As if your salary demands are in line with the job, if you're willing to take the job, they should hire you regardless. So that could be one of those code words, you're overqualified. Why would you want this? You're going to have someone younger than you be your boss. Well, you're still entitled to that job if you're qualified for it.
Let's get into the issue of proving age discrimination, because we talked about how difficult it was earlier, and it really is. Part of that is keeping scrupulous records.
Yes.
Right? So what do you suggest that people do?
From the legal side, paper is king. Our investigators like to see paper. Juries eventually, if you get to a jury, like to see paper. You know, someone can come in and say, well, I told my boss this, and we ask you, when was that? I don't remember. Or what did you actually say? I don't remember. But if you have an email or a letter or something written that you can give us, it's better. Keep your performance evaluations. A lot of times what we see in age cases is for 15 years you got the highest rating, 5 stars, and then this year all of a sudden you got 3 stars, and then you get a performance plan, and then this other stuff happens. So keeping track of your own documents, keeping track of the policies of the company. A lot of times people come in and say, do you have your handbook? They say, oh, I think I had it somewhere. Keep all of your paper. Keep it in one place so you can get it.
And then Rita, what are the steps that people should take if they suspect they're a target of age discrimination? How do they begin the process in the workplace or freshly out of it?
Yeah, I think that HR needs to foster the environment for people to feel comfortable coming in and having the conversations, even before it feels like it is actual discrimination, just a discomfort with the general tenor of the workplace. Employers have an obligation to make all employees feel engaged and productive and valued. And I think that when you start seeing distinctions, all you're doing is inviting the claim or the lawsuit. And so I encourage all of my managers and even the general population to engage with one another and learn from one another. I think that that's the best thing that HR can do.
Jennifer, in your studies of employers and workplace age discrimination, how does this affect productivity and the environment? Don't we see an upside at this point in generations working together? And we're entering a period now where there are going to be 5 generations in the workplace.
Absolutely. We know that the more diversity in the team, the more productive the team is, and age is an important piece of that diversity. That diversity of team is just so important to increasing communication. Older workers bring higher interpersonal skills often to the workplace. They're better at that. They often have better work ethic, and that work ethic is a model for other workers. They can be mentors. They can pass on that institutional knowledge. That's something that you don't learn just as you get on the job. You learn over trial and error over a period in a workforce. And so they're really valuable to the overall productivity of any organization.
And I think to that point too, the additional value of that experienced worker is that they take things with a more caution or pause demeanor. You need calm in the workforce to be productive. If everything that is happening is a crisis, it's a problem. And so,
well, you haven't worked in a newsroom.
Yeah, that's right. But again, everything is a crisis, and if you have to manage it with all that energy not being channeled, is a problem. Yesterday was a particular moment in which I saw that. We had a session with clients, and we had 2 younger people, millennials both, leading the conversation in that particular case with the client. But they brought in someone older in the organization because they felt that the experience, the gravitas of this person would cause the client to be more comfortable and would have an easier conversation about what was a leadership issue that was new to them. So workers that are younger, recognizing the value of that older worker is what you want to foster. Absolutely.
So what are we doing to, whether it's at AARP or EEOC or Jennifer on the academic level or human resources, what are we doing to educate employers? We keep saying that we have to do that. What are we actually doing?
Well, so at AARP, we've had a program called Best Employers for people over 50, where we publicize it a lot and encourage employers to apply, and have publicized the people who are winners, or the organizations who are winners, in order to stimulate others. And we've gotten more applications every year. But we also are reaching out. You know, we have offices in every state. You heard from our Georgia State Director earlier. And we are trying to work with the local communities to make them understand. We have a program called the Senior Community Service Employment Project, which finds jobs for older workers, helps train them for skills. And we work in a number of ways to help people get the tools that we think will get them the jobs. Because the hardest thing, frankly, you know, when we're talking about age discrimination, the hardest thing is to get a job.
Yeah.
You know, even an age discrimination law, hard as it is to prove, is going to be easier to prove, or the only way to really prove it is if it's a situation where you have the job and they're moving you out. Trying to prove age discrimination because you didn't get hired for a job is, and Steve can correct me if I'm wrong, but a big mountain to climb.
Yeah, it's exceptionally difficult. You're going to need some kind of smoking gun or language or something, or some kind of policy. And one thing I didn't talk about earlier with the types of discrimination, you can also have what's called disparate impact, where you don't have people behind the doors saying, oh, let's get rid of all the old people, or let's not hire old people. You have a policy that has a disparate impact on older workers. We have a case we're working on now where they wanted to hire people 3 years out of college for the middle of a management positions. Well, people 3 years out of college are probably 25, 26, 27, they're not 48 or 50. So they probably went into this thinking, well, let's get these younger people in, let's just, you know, there's a lot of people graduating from college, need jobs, and they didn't think how it was going to impact older workers. They should have. To me, it's obvious. But there wasn't a plan to discriminate, but the policy did discriminate. It resulted in discrimination.
Well, sometimes it's so obvious, it's right in front of us, and this is what I don't understand either. In the past week or so, we've heard about these massive layoffs at Turner Broadcasting, for example, where they offered, a third of these folks at least over the age of 55. I think it was 50 or 55 who'd been there like 20 years, buyout packages. But I mean, that's just like advertised. So I mean, isn't that a form of age discrimination? It's like they're saying we want to just call the older workers out so we can save money and up our stock price.
Yeah, the biggest place you see.
I don't understand why that's legal, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, if they make it voluntary and say, look, here's a buyout package, you've earned this many benefits or whatever, and we'll pay you X to leave. And then you're going to sign a waiver or some kind of release, which is, one issue here. If y'all do get laid off and someone offers you a release or a severance package, have it looked at by a lawyer.
Yes.
Because if you sign it, a lot of times you'll waive your claim, you won't be able to bring it. But layoff cases is where age discrimination really is very prominent, because you're going to have numbers. A lot of times we'll have to report who they laid off and their ages. There's a law that requires that for certain employers. So you'll be able to look through and say, look at the population of people being laid off and look at the population of people not being laid off. And I have a case I'm working on now that's in litigation. Every employee over 64 and over was laid off. And all the people who were laid off, there was 11 people laid off, 7 were over 60, 4 were under 60, and 3 of those people got their jobs back. Those are easier ones. That's probably the flip side of the application cases, or the hiring cases, is the layoff cases. It's legal if they don't require it, or if they have a reasonable factor other than age, or a reason why they did it other than age. They can show that the income of the company was going down, they didn't make changes, and it wasn't based on age. And that gets into their reasons why they did it, whether it's a subjective component or objective components. Then you can figure out whether there was an intent.
I guess they'd probably tell you, well, the longer you're there, the more money you're making, so they'll claim it's a financial issue.
And that can be legitimate.
I still love my old company. Or what? Question from the audience?
Yeah, good morning. My question is, excuse me, I like to know why there has to be a discrimination period in an age and find a job in Georgia. Meaning the word discrimination to me, it could be anything from your sex, your color of your skin, your weight, your height. But you shouldn't judge a person's way they are, no matter if it's the skin, the color, or whatever, the age. Just give the person a chance to work and do the job.
Well said.
So I think that's a great way to want to look at society, but The idea of ageism was coined in 1968, and it has happened for generations. So we did have a point when society respected the elderly. We've seen a derogation of the elderly for many, many years, and the elderly word is being applied to younger and younger people. And again, is it acceptable? No. Is it appropriate or even accurate to say that as you age, you're less of anything as a worker? Not so. It's just a societal view. And women, by the way, used to be called out looking for young woman, 25 or under, to be a person on my front desk. Attractive, by the way, by whatever standard. So this has happened before. It happens that now it's affecting us much more.
Can I say, you know, one of the things I want to say is the reason this is a big issue now is that people are not able to retire at early ages. A lot of this is employers' paternalistic assumption that, oh, you know, Joe is getting ready for retirement, he'll be okay. But the fact of the matter is that more and more people, you know, we've added 30 years to the lifespan in the 20th century, and those are 30 years that people are going to have to support themselves, whether they either have to work or they have to have enough money saved to support themselves. And what we find is that half of the workers who are in that age nearing retirement, like over 45, where they should be thinking about it, they don't even have $25,000 saved for retirement.
Yeah. No. And on top of that, I think attitudes have changed, Jennifer, because I don't think a lot of people want to retire. Right. I don't want to retire, even if I could. That's another factor.
We're
I think
healthier.
our parents' generation looked forward to that and planned it. We're like, what?
Well, there's a couple of things that are different, right? I mean, people who have higher compensation and have more education want to continue in the workplace because it's engaging and fulfilling. Others have to remain in the workplace because they don't have the savings they need. And there's no longer the defined benefit plans that used to happen even in the blue collar jobs where you knew what you were going to make on a monthly basis for the rest of your life. Right. Now we're talking about defined contribution plans, which means people have to save, and the risk is on the individual rather than the employer. And that means that people can't save and don't save, and you hit a recession, you hit a downturn in the economy, and older workers are out of jobs and not able to get back into those jobs because of the persistent stereotypes that are negative for older workers.
Right.
Yep. And another question from the audience. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. Being from Georgia, born and raised, my quick question is if we've ever seen discrimination. I've heard a lot of my friends and HR people say Georgia is a right-to-work state. So there's such a fine line. Is it worth their benefit to pursue this, or just we all take it with a grain of salt and be thankful we have work?
We see that issue come up a lot where they say, well, it's a right-to-work state, and I can fire you for any reason, which is true, but they can't fire you for an illegal reason. They can't fire you because of your age, gender, race, or whatever. And so I think a lot of employers who aren't educated, and we see this with smaller companies that get big all of a sudden and they don't know how to handle their HR, they think, well, they've been told it's a right to work state, I can fire for any reason. But that still doesn't mean you can fire them because of their age. You can fire them for bad reason, good reason, but not an illegal one.
Thank you for that.
Do we have another question up here in the audience? Yes.
Thank you. You had mentioned earlier some of the negative connotations to older workers. With that in place, as an applicant, should you try to dispel that in the interview?
Well, it depends on how the interview develops. One of the things that I have read consistently in HR literature recently is that the older worker doesn't even get to the interview.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
So given that, I think that HR departments need to make sure that they are mindful of that mix of diversity in the employment recruitment pool. I think that is important for that to happen, to give you the opportunity to showcase your ability to do the job well.
And perhaps we should talk for just a second about some tools and strategies for people who have left the workplace but are now trying to get back in also.
Some of the things that I tell folks to do is if you're unemployed, go do volunteer work. Even if you're not getting paid, the fact that you're doing something and contributing to an organization in a meaningful way is helpful show of your intent to remain active and current in technology, in policies and practices, in public issues that are happening, just in general business skills. So if you do that, that's very helpful. And then I'm not particularly enamored of networking, but do use your network. We all have contacts, and we should ask people. They're willing to help us if we tell them we need the help.
You know,
Yeah,
one of the things that we see, and I think it's important to think about, is that we think about entrepreneurs and we think about Silicon Valley and all those young kids that are starting businesses. Well, the fact is that people over 50 start businesses at twice the rate of people under 50. Now, there's a good side to that, which is, maybe they're people who have ideas they've had their whole life and they really want a chance to, solve a problem. And the bad side is, that they lost a job and can't get another job. But if we look at the good side, I just want to tell a real quick story. There's a man whose wife had severe arthritis, and she couldn't manipulate the potato peeler. And he decided that he would develop something that she could use. Now, this man had just retired and he was 66 years old. And what did he start? He started the OXO Kitchen Tools Company.
Oh, wow.
And let me tell you, you don't have to be 60 years old to need one of those potato peelers with a fat handle. I bet everybody in this room has one in their kitchen. So it's great. We have a program at AARP called Life Reimagined for Work. And it's a way that helps people who want to do something other than perhaps what they did during the majority of their working life, but still need to get an income. So if you go on our website and look at Life Reimagined for Work, you can see tools and ways in which you can figure out what it is you might be good at. We do work with the Small Business Administration to help people figure out how to start their own businesses. I mean, there are things you can do, and I absolutely agree with what Rita said. If you volunteer someplace, you can come volunteer for AARP. But if you volunteer someplace and it's someplace you have a passion for, that will keep you busy. It will develop skills, and in some places it might lead to a job.
Yes, true. Question from the audience, I think. Over here. Okay.
Yes, James Anthony, one of AARP state volunteers, and proud to be. One of the things that I have to say, matter of fact, just a little footnote. Me and my wife are Katrina evacuees, or whatever you like to call them. And our 401k became a 201 after readjusting and coming here. One of the things that I see, because one of the workshops that we offer is a technological workshop for seniors, just to find out how it is to work these iPads and so forth. But I see a lot of the jobs are online now, so I think it's very intimidating for a lot of seniors to get in there. That's one of the reasons why I think our tech workshop has been so popular. But I think that's one of the ways of a lot of companies discriminating, because a lot of seniors are petrified of going on, even if they can work their phones, of going online and putting out applications and so forth.
Absolutely. You want to come up and be on the panel?
What do you think the future of the workplace is going to look like? We alluded to that a few moments ago about how there's not going to be enough people to fill these jobs. What does the future workplace look like, Jennifer?
Well, unfortunately, we're doing better in terms of unemployment. We're doing better in terms of jobs growth recently, but we're growing more bad jobs, jobs that have few benefits, low pay, and bad time horizons, right, in terms of standard work arrangements, and fewer good jobs that have pensions and full-time arrangements. So as we go forward, it's harder because people who had good jobs are now being forced to take the bad jobs in the economy. And so, but on the upside, there's going to be a lot of need for older workers in the workforce. As Cheryl talked about, the pig and the python, we now have you know, a rectangularization of the population aging, right? And so there's not more younger people than older people. As we move through the coming decades, we have older people as a huge proportion of the workforce, and we need them to be able to meet the demand for healthcare, for social services, for technology. We need older people in the workforce. It's going to be important.
So do we think the issue of age discrimination in the workforce is going to get better or worse before it gets better, or?
Prognosticating.
That's right. Prognosticating is not a great thing, and I would not dare do that.
We just need hope.
But
I think is what we're looking
for.
But
the idea is, I think that is with every pendulum in society, we see flips back and forth. There will be a recognition, not too far distant future, that we don't have the bodies to hire. They're not graduating fast enough. They're not graduating with the skills that we need sometimes. And so the retention of that older workforce and even hiring of that older workforce, I think, will happen. All you have to think about is in 2030, the last of the boomers will begin their retirement.
If they can.
So, if they can, right. So if that pig and the python is real, imagine the lack of workers that we would have when that happens. And we will see more older people doing what Cheryl just mentioned, creating the Oxos of this world. I think that we are taking steps on that because we're starting businesses faster than other groups.
And if you look at occupations that are older than average in general, like take occupations like registered nurses, they are older than average, and they're seeing their nurses retire, and they're doing heroic efforts to retain those nurses in the workplace, because otherwise the hospitals won't function, the long-term care organizations won't function. And so there is some hope that when we get to the point where it's on the, you know, that we have a demand issue for workers, that it will change, because they'll have to change.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that what Winston Churchill once said? You can always trust Americans to do the right thing after they've tried everything else?
Yeah, exactly. Any more questions from the audience? Do we have a couple of them I see here?
Right here. My name is Renee Kale. I am really curious. Employers can be really sneaky about not hiring, and the reason I'm saying that is a lot of us will send resumes in, and you'll never hear anything back. But they can ask us our age, so how can we hold them accountable and get some type of response? We need to know why you don't want, I mean, we know a lot of it is age discrimination, but we would like them to tell us why we did not get hired. And how can we do that?
Yeah, it's a whole nother that's a whole nother show, frankly.
Yes. I was going to say,
circulating
I
the
don't want to
resume.
intrude in Steve's world, so I think there may be a place for him to answer. I don't think human resources can talk about that in one sentence.
I think she's really too just talking about the problem we have today in finding a job where you send a resume off into the Ethernet somewhere, or even hand deliver it, whatever, and no one responds. It just falls off a cliff, and you don't know what the reason is. You don't know the job could have been filled from within even before you applied for it, things like that. So
it's really difficult. The couple things you can do is, one, if you can get a reason why, and the same thing goes for firing. You know, if they just fire you and one day show up with a pink slip, ask them why. If you can get a response. A lot of times if you're applying to Target or Walmart, it's online, you may never hear from them again, you won't get a response. But a lot of those cases come to light from someone on the inside who sees what's going on and report it to us or somebody else. But that is the single most difficult claim to prove or even learn about, is the hiring case. If you get a job ad that has some language that may be suspect, like like I said, within 3 years of graduation is encouraged or something like that, bring that to our attention. Or if you actually get an interview and they say something like, you're too experienced or whatever, bring that to our attention as well. But that is the single most difficult claim to discover and to bring.
Okay, and before I take my seat, has anybody initiated any type of sensitivity training for employers in terms of age discrimination?
I won't say sensitivity training, but when we do find a violation in an age case, part of our resolution, if we don't litigate, part of our internal resolution is training, and it'll be training on usually all of our statutes, but particularly the ADEA for all your management in a certain area wherever the discrimination occurred, to go in and have someone teach them about age discrimination. A lot of these management don't even know any of the laws. I had a case recently where I deposed 4 different people from management and asked them, what is age discrimination? I got 50, I got 60, I got seniors like me, and I don't know. The closest was the HR person, so I gave her credit, but they just didn't know. They had no idea.
Wow.
Yeah.
Your point is well taken, and I do think that their HR has a lot to do because we promote policies and practices in the organization, and it is our obligation to make sure that they know what they wrote and what they do needs to match, so that Steve finds it a little more difficult to file the claim. Tongue in cheek here, but no, it's a serious issue, and I do think that some organizations make an effort to do something. Most organizations are so accustomed to just rote policies, and they don't even think about what they mean. So,
one more question.
Here. Hi, my name is Yvonne, and I have a twofold question. First of all, I want to know what we can do with our senators, our congressmen, our governors, or anybody like that. Is there something that we can do for them to let them know that we are concerned citizens, and we want to see what they're doing to help us to alleviate us not being employed? And then in addition to that, I was thinking about a long time ago how they had something called the Affirmative Action Program, and how come they can probably implement an affirmative action program for senior citizens. That would be a good suggestion.
It's an interesting concept.
Well, can I address the
Anybody want to take that on?
I'm going to address the congressional one. I think, since the Protection of Older Workers Against Discrimination bill, it will be an act if it's enacted, is a federal proposal, it would be appropriate, and we would hope that you would contact your members of Congress and your senators especially, and ask them to co-sponsor it and support it, and give them reasons, that you're a constituent. I mean, they care. Look, older people vote much more than any part of the population.
There's nothing controversial about this bill at all. It really is just bringing it back in line with the other statutes.
Yeah.
There's nothing controversial.
Are you finding
it's bipartisan?
Yeah, I was going to say, are you finding it has bipartisan support?
It is a bipartisan proposal, and it is something that is rare in this Congress, and is getting stuck in the wheels of Congress never turning very fast, I think.
Right.
So what it needs is support from the population. And I think that, that's why I am thrilled that you asked that question.
And affirmative action in the workplace takes into consideration age as well. Just so you know, the affirmative action plans of any organization have a particular focus on comparing the aging population coming in or within the organization to the general population of the organization. The thing is, again, as Steve says, there are many factors that could cause for someone who's older not to advance versus someone younger. And it's not always necessarily a discriminatory act, or at least it cannot be shown to be so. And so the law is only as good as what we document.
In the last couple of minutes that we have here, from each of you very quickly, your chief piece of advice, the one thing that you would advise our audience to do if they feel they're the target of age discrimination.
Well, I mean,
or how to
after
avoid
you
it.
contact your senators and congressmen
Exactly.
and women, You know, I think, well, I'm not going to say what Steve's going to say, so I'll say something different. I think that it is really important for people to do everything you can to keep the job you have, first of all. If you think, you know, you look around and look at yourself and you think, hey, maybe somebody might be wanting to get rid of me. Or maybe the grass is greener. The grass is not greener. But so keep the job you have as long as you can, because you're going to need it. And if you think that you might want to do something else, really investigate our Life Reimagined website to see how you could figure out a way to make yourself some money, even in quasi-retirement. I think that's a really, it's a good step to take.
Steve?
For me, I think the most important thing to do is complain. Complain in writing. Follow your HR process for how complaints should be filed so that you do it properly, and then come see us. Make sure you come see us within 180 days of whatever the discrimination was, whether it's a promotion or firing or hiring. If you don't do it within 180 days, you won't have a claim.
Rita?
And I think if you're employed, start ringing the bell as soon as you feel something is happening. Go to your HR person, talk with them, make it notice, because that's when most of the time you will see some activity so that they are stemming that potential discrimination.
And Jennifer?
Become an advocate. I think if you get educated about the issues and become an advocate, social networks are really powerful. And if you see others that are struggling to find a job, do what you can to reach out and help them. And if we help each other, those social networks can work and together to advocate for one another instead of sort of one man on his own.
And thank you all for educating us today and for some great advice. And the audience, great questions. Thank you for coming today and for participating in this discussion. And I'll turn the program over now to Joe Dukes, who's the AARP Georgia Executive Council President. Joe?
Greetings. I'm Joe Dukes, AARP Georgia State President. AARP is working to ensure every American worker is treated fairly on the job. Our efforts are more important today than ever before. With so many older workers having been hit especially hard by the recession. We thank you for joining us for this live panel discussion today about the issue of age discrimination and resources to empower Georgians. We also thank Georgia Public Broadcasting, our AARP volunteers, members and staffs, and invited guests for making this broadcast possible. If you need more information, please visit us at aarp.org/GA and follow AARP Georgia on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you.